I was teaching an ensemble class of younger, less experienced jazz students the other day, and there's a question that I usually pose to them specifically. How much jazz are you listening to? The answers vary, of course, but most of them say something like, I usually have it on, or my parents have it on when we're eating dinner or cooking or cleaning, or something like, yes, I listen to the songs you assign us, but only a few times a week. From there, I generally talk to them how important it is to listen to music you want to play, which means this applies obviously across the board to any genre right out the gate, not just jazz. You want to listen to it as often as possible, but also to make sure it's not just in a passive context, like in the car on the way to school while you're trying to catch a few more Z's or studying for a quiz you forgot about the night before. And that's when I went over the subject of this video. I talked to them about active listening. To get straight to the point, active listening to me is a way of listening or studying music in a participatory manner, or a way that involves your focus and undivided attention. So for these students, I broke it down into 3 main pillars that I want to share with you. The first pillar is to transcribe a piece of music, whether it's a song or a solo, or parts of a song or parts of a solo. The first part of this pillar I would expand upon is harmony. Essentially, what are the chords that are played within a song that you like to listen to or are assigned? If you play guitar or piano and are more on the beginner end or are composing, definitely start here. It'll reinforce and expand your understanding of what is available to you and how to use it in a way that it's very musical. Obviously, it's good for everyone to study this because it applies across the board. It's something that we solo over, that, if you're writing, you need to know, even if you're a melodic player or whatnot. So it definitely is something that particularly you want to study and will get immense benefit of if you play a chordal instrument like piano or guitar. The next part would be melody. Transcribing the melody of a song really gets your ears better at digesting and replicating things that are momentary, and strengthens your short-term memory, which is absolutely key when improvising. An example of this would be like when you play some type of motive or a small idea that you want to remember and recall later. You want to be able to understand like what you played and replicate it, maybe change the key, slightly vary it or whatnot later on. And that takes an active, focused ear to actually execute that. Transcribing a melody also helps you develop a better connection with your mind's ear. So like your mind's eye, but for musicians. So that over time you can play what you hear in your head more quickly and accurately. Also, it helps us understand what it means to write a good, memorable line over different types of changes. Of course, that means you got to know what's going on in harmony to really understand the depth of what each note's role is within that context, and how the harmony is supporting the melodic idea. They're pretty much intrinsically linked, obviously. Another thing to transcribe too is the solo or improvisation of an artist on a particular song. So here you would earn the building blocks or the keys to drive your own solos into new heights. If you like what Herbie did, on this record, then it just might be worth it to make the time to play it for future reference, or just to understand the context and the structural approach that he's taking, and the feel and all of the details and nuances. I do want to draw emphasis on a few things that I learned over the years and through different musicians and just doing it myself. Don't write things down immediately, because number one, it's a very tedious thing to write down, like, okay, I figured out these 4 notes, let me write them down. Focus on trying to play either at least the whole phrase if you are going to write it down, I wouldn't even just write it down until you get the entire solo or section that you actually want to learn. So a short story about how not to do this is, from my experience, I tried to transcribe a Wes Montgomery solo, and it was before there was like any slowdowner kind of software, and it was pretty tedious, and I was trying to write it by hand in notation every note that I got, or like maybe a few notes that I got maybe like 4 bars into it, and I was just like, this took me forever. It was such a headache. I tried to make sure I wrote it correctly, so I was like counting in my head and all this stuff, and I ended up abandoning it and never really like focusing on transcribing solos ever again, which, you know, hindered me, I feel like, tremendously. Handicapped me in my growth. I ended up doing little things here and there, but not to the extent where I could have grown faster and further. So don't focus on writing, focus on playing, or ideally singing the part and then playing the part. And then if you need to, down the line or want to, you can write it out. Another idea, if you're gonna write it down, is maybe just write down a rough generalization of the direction of the line or what's going on, like kind of like a step back perspective. That way, instead of absorbing everything note for note, you are really just borrowing a lens from your favorite artist. So follow this up also repeatedly with experimentation with that new lens to really make it your own. So a good example would be if I heard, you know, Herbie or Miles or any artist, Jimi Hendrix or whatever, do a certain phrase using a certain type of, like, I don't know, pentatonic or something like that. I'll take the general idea and then just tinker around with it until I find a few different ways that I like, including the way that, you know, maybe they played it. And it might not be an exact copy, but because it's something born out of exploration, I make it my own, and it makes it more identifiable to me and more of my voice. Also, a big mistake that I did with that Wes Montgomery solo earlier I mentioned, my goal was to do the entire solo. You do not have to do the whole solo or the song or whatever. There are a lot of things that you can get if you do the whole solo, so I'm not saying don't do that, but don't feel obligated to do that every single time. If there is a particular solo that you really want to learn from front to back, absolutely do it. But you can, you know, take pieces of it. The best advice that I ever got about transcription came from 2 musicians at 2 different times. They basically told me to take what you like. So it seems easy, right? But at least for me, I needed to hear that from someone else to kind of give me permission to approach it that way. Don't transcribe something because you think you should. Do it because you feel compelled to steal it or use it, or you just feel it so much that like you want to include it in your own repertoire. So moving on to the next pillar, it would be research. So looking into the personnel in a particular record, the time period, or who wrote or arranged the music and whatnot. One way to really get in depth with a recording is to take the time to read the liner notes. I personally don't do this enough, which, yes, I should be shamed for, but get to know who was on the record, because that can open a lot of doors. Say, for example, you like the pianist on a record like Kind of Blue. So you look them up and you find out that there are 2 different pianists on that record. And that fact alone ideally should trigger your curiosity to be asking, who is on this? Who are these guys? And then maybe you ask, like, well, what kind of stuff do they do on their own? This leads to you checking out Wynton Kelly's Smoking at the Half Note, and probably Bill Evans' Portrait of Jazz, or whatever you might find. Then you read the liner notes of that and check out their personnel, and this starts this whole domino effect that just pays dividends down the line, because now you are getting more and more involved in the music that you're listening to. At the end of the day, you are understanding their entire bag, which brings even more depth to your ears. It's not just faceless musicians playing something and you're listening to it. It's, oh, I understand, or I recognize that person's style. He's on this record, or she's on this record, and they're contributing this way. Oh, they're probably going to do this and that. And that kind of recognition helps you on the bandstand too. Another thing you can get out of the liner notes is the reviewer or whoever is writing it talking about details of the artist or the recording or the compositions. And some of that can really elicit some deep feelings and realizations that I know I have had, like reading some liner notes. Inspiration is one of the keys to success in keeping momentum to move forward. So anywhere you can find something like that is worth the time and effort to explore. It doesn't really take that long either. It's only, a couple pages long at most. You never know. It just might open up your mind or perspective to compel you to play different, write more deeply, or just appreciate the art and artist and your own process more. Another thing you can do in terms of research is read up on what was happening around the time of the recording, or what inspired it, how it happened, anything else of note that might have inspired the album. Wikipedia is a great place to start, although there are definitely books out there that focus on some recordings specifically. Or better yet, you can read biographies of the artists. Honestly, one of my favorite things to do is to read a biography of an artist and follow along with the music that they made at the time period I happen to be reading about. This not only develops a better understanding and deeper relationship between the music and the artist I might be reading about or listening to, it also reminds me that art isn't just created out of nowhere and just for the sake of it. There's meaning and purpose and emotion and a community involved in it, and that's why we do this in the first place. And really, that's how it's ever even made in the first place too. Now, the last pillar I want to talk about would be the ability to play along to the record. It's the ultimate way of active listening, because you're listening and playing and, kind of having this dialogue or pseudo dialogue with the recording. I've done this. You've probably done this. And if you haven't, you better start now. You should be playing along with records from the beginning and until you can't play anymore. There's no point in which you can't get something out of playing along with the record. Recordings and records are one of the greatest gifts to grace our art form, because it enables all of us to practice and feel to a certain extent what things should sound like, should feel like, and how it should fit with the rest of the band. Playing along to a record unlocks all the answers to all the questions. You want to know how to play some deep voicings with great rhythm and thoughtful placement? Play side by side with Herbie on Speak Like a Child. You want to know how to get a beautiful tone out of your horn? Listen to Cannonball or Wayne on their records, especially on ballads. I particularly like to hear the ballads because it really focuses on their tone, and you're able to just hear them stay on longer notes. Honestly, it feels like a cop-out answer to me to say everything you ever need is in the record. But to be fair, that's not wrong. We have access to the greatest collection of audio known to man with just a click, thumb scroll, or whatever away, and all we really got to do is listen with intention and pick up what we can. Rinse and repeat, and over time, yes, a long time, but it's worth every minute, you'll grow into the musician or artist that you dream to be. If you enjoyed this video and got something out of it, please do me a favor and like and subscribe to my channel, where I'll be doing more of these types of talks, as well as going over technical approaches and examples to getting better at piano and guitar specifically, but also going over theory, approaches that you can apply on pretty much any instrument, and many other subjects. Take care and keep exploring.